Hey, this is Daniel from Catfish Sumo. Have you ever wished that you could have a guide look at a map where you fish and show you exactly where the fish could be and tell you to go fish in that spot and then have the confidence to know that you can go fish that spot and catch fish? Well, that's what I want to offer you today is a look over my shoulder as I go out and plan a fishing trip. So here's what's happening is tomorrow morning, I'm planning a fishing trip and I want to give you a look over my shoulder as I plan a trip the day before. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm looking at on a topo map. And then tomorrow when I go out fishing, then I'm going to show you exactly all the fish that I caught in that area and kind of what I'm seeing in the area around me. So first thing that I'm going to be doing is jumping into a free tool. It's one of the free tools that we teach in the Kayak Catfishing Masterclass. If you're interested in that and a bunch of other information on how to catch big catfish out of a kayak, you can check out catchcatfishfromakayak.com and all the information is there. But don't worry about that right now. First, let's just jump into one of these free tools. I'm going to be looking at a topo map and just kind of be verbalizing what I'm looking for. And what I'm looking for is following what we call the 3 rights framework. And it is how you make sure that you never get skunked when you go out fishing. And it is the right spot with the right rig and the right bait. And we're going to be starting right now with the right spot. And that's mostly what we're going to be looking at in this video is the spots that I use to fish. And what I'm looking for is a spot that has a holding area for the fish. It has a feeding area nearby, and then it has some kind of highway that goes in between those two. And let me show you what I mean. Let me jump over and share the screen here. All right, this is an area on the Tennessee River that I am interested in fishing tomorrow. My plan is to wake up a little before sunrise and get to this boat ramp and be on the water just as the sun is rising. Because I know that early in the morning in this area, the fish are in their holding areas and then they start moving out. Usually the smaller fish move out first and then the bigger fish. So if they haven't moved out yet, I'll start in the holding areas. And once the bite slows down there, then I'm going to be looking for one of the feeding areas or the highways in between. And my plan is to anchor in one of those areas where I know the fish are going to be coming through. Now, let me show you in this map what I am seeing. And maybe this will be useful for you to be able to go look at some of the water that you fish and look for these similar types of areas. So this is the ramp that I'm going to be launching from. And from fishing this lower section of this river before, I know there's some really deep holes, like 100 feet, 90 feet. This one says 97 feet. And this is a really narrow portion of the river. So this is a deep gorge before this area was flooded to make the lake. There's really steep rock banks on each side, and then the river channel is down in between. So it's basically like a drop off on each side. And in some of these areas, it gets really narrow, like maybe 20 feet wide in these choke points, where pretty much if you anchor in one spot, like for example here, and you drop bait off your left side and your right side of your kayak, then you're covering this entire bottleneck. And any fish that move through here, you're going to have baits right in front of them. So my plan first is to find one of the holding areas. And the one that I was looking at on here that I'm really interested in is only about a mile. Let me pull up the measuring tool here and make sure, because I really don't want to go too far in the kayak. Looking at maybe a mile. Yeah, here we go. So I really like this right here because this is a deep hole. This says 85 feet here, and back behind it, there's another. It says 80. It's really more like 85 here and 88 feet back here, 91 feet. So these are 2 really deep bowls, and then they have this kind of hump in between. And I know from looking at the river from the bank, because I've banked fished some of this area before, I know that this river is not very wide at all. So I know that I can put my boat right here and have my baits in front of any fish that pass by. So my plan in the morning is to park in one of these holding areas, maybe here or maybe here, and fish there until the bite dies down. And once the smaller fish have moved out, then the bigger fish are going to move out. And once they do, I think that I'm going to look at this choke point right here and anchor there, because any fish that are moving upriver, like out of this deep hole on the left side of the screen, are going to come through that area. And any fish that are moving downriver, like out of this deep hole, are going to come by my area. So I know that I can just anchor here tomorrow morning with confidence. And even if the fish aren't biting right away, I know at some point they are going to get active and they're going to start moving through this area, because probably where they're heading is one of the feeding areas. And there's a big flat here. TVA dumps water right here. And I know that that's a heavy feeding area. There's some creek dump ends that come here, and this kind of levels out into a flat over here. So I know that there's some prime feeding areas in this area, and any fish that move through, I want to have bait right in front of them. So that's kind of my plan. Here, let me pop this screen share back off. That's my plan for tomorrow morning. I would love for you to come along. I'm going to record the video. And if we don't catch any fish, then we'll talk about why and where they could be. But I'm very confident that tomorrow, if we go out to one of these spots, because it is near home, near a feeding area, and has a clear highway in between, I know that if I anchor here, that we're going to catch some fish tomorrow. So the next section of this video is going to be fishing, and hope we're going to catch some fish. Let's see. Well, this morning I didn't get on the water quite as early as I had hoped. In fact, it was probably about an hour and a half after sunrise that I got on the water, and I was a little worried that the fish might have moved out of those deeper holes. So the first place that I started and dropped all my rods down was up on the top of that hump between two of those deep holes. And I caught a couple of fish there. In fact, I caught some fish that I forgot to record, and caught 3 or 4 smaller ones, and then the bite kind of died down. So then I was thinking that maybe the bigger fish were still down in that deeper hole. So I drifted back a little bit to that deep hole and anchored there, and the bite was right back on. Almost as soon as I was dropping baits down, I was catching fish, still in the smaller size, more fun size, and a couple dinks, and caught some, a lot of fish, had a lot of fun doing it, but still wasn't finding the biggest fish that I was looking for. So I stayed down there for a little bit and caught some fish, and then after a bit I moved up onto that hump. Even down in this hole, the fish were very active, and as the water temperatures are coming up, there's just not really any place for them to be that's not in front of my bait. So either in the hole or up on that hump and that bottleneck between the two deepest holes, there's not really anywhere that fish could be and not be getting scent from my bait. So caught this one blue. In fact, he tangled up a whole bunch of my lines all kind of together. And it was a good fish, but this was the biggest fish that I caught down in that deep hole. And then after this, the bite kind of died off. And so since he was the biggest one that I caught, and then the bite kind of died off after that, that's what made me move back up onto that hump. And that's where I spent the rest of my time. But first I had to untangle a whole bunch of my lines because he had wrapped all 4 of my lines all together. So spent some time doing that, and then moved up onto that that tallest point, that choke point right in between. And on the water, I confirmed that it really was. I went from left to right, from one side of the river to the other, and confirmed that I really was right in the middle of that bottleneck, and it's only about 20 feet wide. So with my baits on each side of the kayak, there's nowhere for those fish to come through and not see my bait. And it came through periods. That's kind of the thing with these bottlenecks, is that the bite is either on or it's off. The fish are either moving through or they're not. They're not really holding up in these areas. They're just kind of in transit. So when you do start getting bites, it's kind of on and it's on fire. And I had multiple hookups kind of all at the same time at different points over the next maybe 45 minutes, and caught a lot of fish. Over and over, caught a lot of fish, multiple doubles. I had, at one point I had 2 fish on and another rod going down. And that's the fun of these choke points, is that when the fish are moving through, when there's active feeding going on, you're going to have a really good time catching a lot of fish. And if they're not there, you just have to have the patience to be able to sit there and wait for the fish to move through, because you know that they are. You know that they're, at some point in time, they're either going to be going from feeding to home or home to feeding, and the fish will move through that area. So after I got kind of a lot of fish in the smaller size, then the bite died down, and I probably didn't have a bite for another maybe 30 or 45 minutes of no bite through this area. But I was confident to be able to wait there and wait, because I knew the big fish were going to be moving through. I knew they'd be moving up out of that hole, up into the feeding area, and I wanted to keep my bait there, just waiting for them to come through. And didn't have to wait too long. Had a little bit of time with no bites. but the wind kind of changed a little bit and the water temperatures continued to rise, and I knew the big fish were going to move through, and they finally did. And I got this really nice fish that you'll see here in just a minute, and it fought hard. The second that it hit, line was down in the water and tried to put pressure on it, and it just did not budge off the water. Off the bottom. It took a lot of effort to try to finally start getting it up. And I took my time with it, wanted to make sure that it could decompress. I was fishing here in about 65 feet of water. I wanted to make sure that it can decompress. And I got to put on a little bit of a show because at one point, about halfway up, there was a tour boat that went by, a bunch of people in a pontoon boat, and it seemed like a tour guide kind of giving instructions or, giving information about the area. So I got to put on a little bit of show for them, and they stopped for a little bit and watched and then continued on their way. Unfortunately, they didn't hang around long enough to see the fish because I fought this fish for maybe 7 or 8 minutes. Unfortunately, they didn't see it, but I still had a really good time fighting it. And especially so happy that, picking the right spot and then putting bait there, that eventually I knew the fish were going to move through there, and then they did. This fish mostly just pulled straight down. Didn't do a whole lot of moving around. I ended up getting one line tangled in there that I had to move over. And then eventually got it up to the top. And what I caught was a really nice flathead. It had a big belly and super bright colors. What I love so much about the Tennessee River flatheads is that they have a lot of yellow in them. They're very speckled. They're not just brown all over. They have a lot of yellow, very speckled. And this one had a big belly, a big head, a wide tail. It was no wonder why it took so much effort to get it up off the bottom, because he basically just decided, I'm going to sit on the bottom and you're going to have to fight me to get out. And eventually did. I ended up measuring it. I kind of have a ruler on the side of my kayak. It's not perfect. It kind of curves around the boat, so it's not, tournament grade by any means. But it ended up crossing 37 inches. So somewhere between 37 and 38 inches was this flathead, and super fat, very heavy. It was a beautiful fish, a really nice fish, and a joy to fight. And I ended up letting it go. That's what we do with all the big fish. Let it go, let it grow, and just great to be able to sit in the same spot, know that the fish are going to move through there with confidence, be able to wait there even when I wasn't getting a bite, and eventually they did. I wanted to stay around a little bit longer, but I really had to get off the water, had to someplace to be. So I put my baits down for just a little bit longer and caught one more fish, but not all of them can be big ones. But if you're interested in more information about finding the right spot and using the 3 rights framework, which is the right spot, the right rig, and the right bait, in order to never get skunked again. Because the thing about catching big catfish is it isn't guesswork. It's just using the 3 rights framework to have your bait in the right spot where the fish are going to move through, and then you can confidently stay there and catch big catfish. So if you're interested in learning more about the 3 rights framework, you can go to catchcatfishfromakayak.com and learn more about it there.